Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to continue our study of quadratics. We're going to talk first about vertex form of a quadratic, all right? And then we're going to talk about completing the square. Okay. All right, so let's focus on vertex form. First, vertex form is simply another way to rewrite a quadratic equation, okay? And when you write it in vertex form, it automatically gives you your vertex, which your vertex is also known as your minimum or your maximum point. So you already know how to find this point because that's one of the things we've been studying when we've been studying the key points and features of a quadratic. So you already know how to find it. This is another way to find that point, that minimum or maximum value. We're just going to call it your vertex. One way to remember your vertex is with an angle. You remember that's where your two rays meet. Okay, so if you had an angle, the point right here where they meet, that's your vertex. Okay, same kind of thing with a quadratic. If you have a smiley quadratic, your vertex is that point right there, your minimum point or your maximum. All right, so standard form of a quadratic, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. This is standard form. Vertex form looks like this. Y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. Now, the vertex is your h comma k. H comma k. Okay. So when you've got it written in this form, you can see it's going to give you your h, it's going to give you your k. You know this is still a quadratic because of the square. All right, so let's see if we can't do some problems here. Now you have to use the process which I mentioned earlier called completing the square in order to turn a quadratic written in standard form into vertex form. Okay, it's a step-by-step process. Pay very close attention to your steps, and as long as you follow these same steps throughout, you'll be able to find your vertex, no problem. All right, so let's say we are given an equation, y equals x squared plus 6x plus 2. All right, step one. So we're using the completing the square here. All right, so step one, we're going to rewrite it. Take your y equals. Then you're going to put some parentheses. Write in your first term, x squared, plus 6x, your second term. Then I want you to put a blank. We're going to have to do a fill in the blank here. Close your parentheses, plus 2. All right, so all I've done, I took my first term, put it here, my second term, put it here. I took this plus 2 and just set it outside the parentheses. All right, we're going to come back to that plus 2 in a minute. Pay attention. All right, so next, we want to find a value for this spot right here, this third term, that's going to be a perfect square. Remember, some examples of perfect squares are going to be 4, 9, 16, 25. Here's why they're perfect squares. 4 is 2 squared. 9 is 3 squared. 16 is, hopefully you said 4 squared. 25 is 5 squared. These numbers right here, these values, are perfect squares. So we need to find a perfect square for this. All right, so here's how we do that. Take your middle term, 6. Divide it by 2. You get 3. Okay? Well, now we want to take that 3 and square it. And what is 3 squared? It's 9. So that's the value that's going to go into this blank space. Okay? Now, when we add a value inside the parentheses, if you don't do anything else, you've totally changed your quadratic. Well, we don't want to totally change the quadratic. We want it to stay as the same quadratic, okay? We're just doing, so you could even consider this some magic math, okay? Because it's a manipulation. But what we have to do is we want to keep the same value for the quadratic. So if we add a 9, we need to somehow take away the 9. And that's where this plus 2 comes into play. Since all of this right here is in parentheses, okay, we need to also take away 9 outside the parentheses. Okay, so you'll notice I put minus 9 out here. All right, now, since we want to write this part in parentheses, like in vertex form, okay, up here, this perfect square, we need to factor this x squared plus 6x plus 9. When we factor that, since I know that we squared it and it's a perfect square quadratic, I know that it's going to be the same set of parentheses squared. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 factored is x plus 3 times x plus 3. And I'm just rewriting it so that it's x plus 3 squared, okay? Now, we need to bring down this 2 minus 9 part. What is 2 minus 9? It's negative 7. And that's what we end up with. This is now written in vertex form. Isn't that cool? I think it's cool. Okay, so there you go. That's completing the square. I'm going to work out another one. Let's look at one like this. All right, so here's the process again. Parentheses, first term, second term, fill in the blank, parentheses, third term. Okay, remember I just moved this minus 2 outside. All right, so now to fill in the blank, I take my middle term divided by 2. Gives me negative 5. I now have to square the negative 5, which gives me a positive 25. And that's what goes inside the parentheses. But again, we want to maintain the value of the quadratic, so what you do to the inside of the parentheses, you do the opposite outside. Okay, so we subtract the 25 here. All right, so now I factor this. We know it's a perfect square, so I can just do one set of parentheses. Negative 2 minus 25, and you're done.